Hello and welcome back to 4FS Gaming. So I have made a trait tier list last year, but a lot has changed since then. We have new traits, we have changes to traits, and we have shifts in the game meta that make different things more or less relevant. So buckle in as I review all 45 traits in Hunt Showdown, and I'm going to rank them. Now I know there are a lot of other out-of-date videos on this channel that you guys would love to see revisited, like those rifle or sidearm reviews. And that will happen once we get customizable ammo and I see where the meta settles after the update that will come with 1.5, hopefully sometime in the next couple of weeks or months. Come on Crytek, give us the update. So for this video I will be looking at 5 tiers. S tier refers to traits that represent significant buffs to your hunter or allow you to regularly make powerful plays that would be simply impossible without that trait. A tier traits are good, they buff your character in a key area and will be used often within the process of a match. B tier traits are mediocre. They will improve your hunter, but only in ways that are occasionally useful. C tier traits have limited application. They provide either very minor or situational buffs. D tier traits are useless. They have functionally no impact on your hunter and you shouldn't take them. This time around I'm going to divide my list into 2 lists. First I will cover broad spectrum traits that are relevant to multiple hunter setups, and then I will look at specific loadout traits in a separate list, because I don't think it's really fair to compare these two on the same table. So before we get started, it is important to remember that this is a tier list, and as such, like all tier lists, this video will contain a combination of facts and my own opinion. I will place a trait in a tier, provide some reasons, but ultimately it comes down to a value judgment. How I place traits will be based on my playstyle and my experience, as different playstyles will tend to prefer different trait setups. So I want to be clear, this is not the Hunt Showdown tier list. This is my Hunt Showdown trait tier list. So feel free to argue and debate in the comments, but please keep it respectful to others. This time around, I won't be placing as much importance on the cost of traits. There are many ways to get Hunter XP, trait points, and traits in the game itself now, so usually points are in abundance. This means that the traits are in competition to fill one of your limited trait slots on a hunter, as there are now more good traits than there are slots to fill. So that is more than enough preamble, let's get stuck in, starting with broad spectrum traits. And we're going to start at the bottom, beginning at D tier. D stands for don't take these traits. We have Decoy Supply. This was once okay back before item boxes were a thing. Now it's pretty terrible, as you can get all your decoys back from an item box. You can also use this to throw a decoy and then use up an ammo box without shooting to deny people that might come past that ammo box later, but it's kind of a waste of time and you might need it too. Then we have Dauntless. The ability to put out explosives sounds great on paper, but in reality you will either forget that you have it or die trying to use it. Try looking for videos of this trait actually working in a match. It just doesn't happen. You can use it to put out fuses to cover your tracks, but again, it's pretty useless. Then we have Vigilant. Seeing traps in Darkside is cool, but you can also see them by looking on the ground. And if you do it that way, then you don't have to make the noisy Darkside animation, you don't have to put away your weapon, and you don't have to tell that nearby shotgun camper in that building that you are temporarily helpless. Don't take this trait, just look on the floor. Now here is a controversial pick. Tomahawk is still D tier. Yeah, I know. It should be double S and all that, but if we're being very serious or sweaty, you're never going to get good use out of the old Tomahawk trait. It's just likely to get you killed. That being said, Tomahawk is in a league of its own when it comes to meme builds and showing supreme dominance over your enemies after you clock them at 30 meters in the head with a shovel. Let's move on to C tier now, and we have some traits that are helpful but limited in scope and impact. Adrenaline gives you stamina when your health is low, which doesn't help that much at all. It could kind of be useful for newer players that struggle with AI or are often caught under fire while out in the open at full sprint and low on movement stamina, but as you improve this stuff becomes less and less relevant. Conduit, even after its buff, is C tier. It's always nice to have, but it really helps you win fights. You can turn that bounty pickup into a health pack, but there are far more reliable traits to assist with healing. Speaking of unreliable healing traits, I would put the new and reworked Ghoul as C tier as well. I have developed the controversial opinion that the recent Ghoul changes have actually nerfed the trait. Ghoul is great when you lose a bar to a cleaver grunt and you can kill another grunt to get that bar back without scrounging for heals or using a first aid charge. But in combat with players, this is not going to be particularly helpful. You need to find a grunt, which are often rapidly cleared out from any combat zone, then you have to make noise revealing your exact position to kill that grunt, and then you have to wait for the rest of the bar to regen after you've got that first little bit of healing in. You could just pay one more trait point and get Frontiersman, which gives you an extra medkit charge anyway, and other stuff. Now we then have Poacher, and I can see how this might be handy when sneaking into a compound by getting past traps that were set up to act as sound traps. But when probing a compound defended by traps, I tend to move fast, I sprint around, I throw explosives, and I look for wallbangs. I'm not going for stealth. This is because going slow and stealthy makes you easy pickings for that third team that arrives 30 seconds after you. Getting up to a doorway, crouching, and then slowly removing a trap is also extremely risky, because they will hear you if they're close enough to that doorway anyway, and shotguns work pretty well through walls at that range. The final trait in C tier is Vulture. Now I feel a little bit weird about placing Vulture here. It's a great perk that allows everyone in a trio to loot. You've just got to remember that outside of weird situations, it's really only decent in trios, and even then only one person in the team needs to have it. So coordinate here. Not every hunter should have Vulture. Okay, moving up in the world to B tier, most of my hunters will end up with a couple of these traits. Hornskin means that you will be healing less bars after messy encounters with AI. It also means that people that keep telling me dusters are just as good as knives for PvP are wrong. You should use a knife because Hornskin will defend you against dusters and you never know who has it. Resilience is also a very useful trait in specific circumstances, not so much because it reduces the chance of immediately being downed upon being revived, but it lets you jump straight back into the fight after getting picked up and support a teammate, which is not usually what your opponents expect. And when you do things that people don't expect, it helps you win. Salveskin means it takes longer to burn you while you're downed. And this isn't that great because choke bombs are everywhere now, but it also means that you take less damage from fire. So an exploding immolator, a hellfire bomb, or a yellow barrel won't take a 25 health bar off you instantly. It is situational, but when it does happen, it's very nice to have Salveskin. Gator Legs also is pretty good now. It got a rework, it's now a speed and stealth perk bundled into one, but it requires you to move through water to get those benefits. It makes moving through water a better option than it was previously or without this perk, but it's still not recommended most of the time. That being said, there have been moments where I'm like, okay, I have Gator Legs, I can go this way, and it's worked out really well for me. Silent Killer has been much improved in my opinion recently, as I lean on the knife rush for mop-up kills more and more. This takes away the audio cue when you prepare a heavy melee attack, which can really help you get the jump on people as they come into a building or push a corner. If you like melee weapons, this is a very, very handy trait. Now it is not good at letting you kill AI stealthily. You need to understand that that is not really the point of this perk, it's not why it's here. AI make noise when they die, you're not killing grunts stealthily if you have this perk. This is good for surprise knife rushes and baiting people into a melee attack round a corner. It's a PvP trait, not a stealth trait. Bloodless is pretty good, and it will save your life against frag bombs every now and then. This trait has always been powerful relative to the prominence of bleed in PvP. So back when shotguns dealt bleed with any hit marker, it would have been S tier easily. And as customizable ammo brings back more options to cause bleed, this trait could see much more use. Similar to Bloodless, we have Mithridatist. As it stands, capping the duration of poison to a few seconds is a handy quality of life improvement to your hunter. But we'll have to see how it stacks up when they add more ways to apply poison in PvP, as they might do with customizable ammo. So this is subject to change. I'm also going to place the new Necromancer trait in B tier. Necromancer is good. It opens up new options in fights, but it's also extremely risky. I have yet to see Necromancer be used effectively against me, and when I use it, if I'm being honest with myself, I could have just completed the revive manually anyway. However, I can see circumstances where this trait could come in very handy. Our final B tier trait is Bulwark. This is only helpful against three things. Dynamites, which you don't use dynamite very much because everyone uses frag bombs because they're better. It helps against red barrel traps, and sticks from a bomb lance. So it is very situational, but tanking a bomb lance shot and then killing the enemy is extremely satisfying. And in those rare moments where you don't see a red barrel trap and almost blow yourself up, you'll be so thankful that you have Bulwark on. Now let's talk about our A tier traits. These provide either very powerful buffs or advantages that are constantly helped throughout the entirety of a match. We're going to start with Determination. This is here because it applies to pretty much everything you do. Stamina is a critical element of Hunt, and it helps you move faster across the map, which is excellent for pursuits. It helps you kill AI quickly, silently, and effectively with little downtime. This is a trait that makes you faster, and speed is very important. Speaking of speed, I also have Greyhound here. Now this is just a great trait to make sure you can catch that cheeky team trying to run away to extract. If you want to win chases, you need Greyhound and Determination. They are the dynamic duo of speed that will be on every single one of my rank 50 hunters, without fail. We then have Pack Mule, and Pack Mule is excellent. Getting double loot means that you can use explosives, flares, meds, everything so much more freely and just pick it all back up from an item box very, very quickly. So I've also put Physician in A tier. This is because when you are bandaging, you are vulnerable, and then you're not also helping your team. Now I talk a lot about avoiding downtime. You need to be able to constantly move and apply pressure in fights, and it's traits like Physician that reduces your downtime and gets you back in there faster. When you hit someone with something and you call out, "He's bandaging, quick get him," and then they shotgun you because they're already done and they've got their weapon out, well, that's what happens when someone has Physician. Okay, so we're now going to talk about a trait that I really like. Whispersmith. Don't sleep on Whispersmith, it is amazing. I was actually pretty close to putting this in S tier, but I couldn't quite justify it outside of my playstyle. So you would think that this trait just makes you harder to detect when switching weapons or gear. Well yes, it does that, but it's not why it's good. The thing is, every single piece of gear in Hunt has a distinct sound when you pull it out and ready it. When you pull out a melee weapon or a knife, someone nearby will know what you have pulled out, because it makes this metallic noise. With a good ear, you can clearly distinguish things like someone pulling out a frag bomb, a hellfire, a concertina bomb, a bomb lance, a pistol. They all have distinct sound effects. So many times I've been able to react early to a hellfire throw because I heard them pull it out. The same for someone getting ready a knife rush. Whispersmith takes this away. It's actually pretty broken. It gives you a good extra half second at least when trying to pin someone with a throwable or bait them into a melee attack. Combined with Silent Killer, it is perfect for your melee builds. Your opponent can chase you around a corner and have no idea that you have both pulled out and readied a heavy attack before you're good to go. If you haven't tried Whispersmith with the new reduced concertina bomb detonation time, give that a go as well. There is zero warning at all before they are swimming through barbed wire. So that's a bit of a rant, but this is a really, really good trait. Frontiersman is also A tier, mainly because it gives you more meds, but also everything else. There's always a use for more flares or choke bombs, and its high cost is less relevant these days with all the trait points lying around, which was its biggest drawback previously. Now, I still have Beastface in A tier. I know a lot of good players don't care much for Beastface, because they just want to run through crows and sound traps anyway and attract players to fights. That's what they want, that's fine, that's kind of what I want too. But I like Beastface because when I'm in a fight, and I'm going for a flank or a rotation, especially when using close range weapons, there will inevitably be some routes through a compound that are blocked by horses or crows, and setting them off would reveal my flank too early. Beastface allows me to take these routes, often without even needing to crouch. Flanking is just so helpful in teamfights, and Beastface lets your flanks be faster while keeping them a nice surprise. This trait gets me kills, it's as simple as that, and that's why it's here. Finally, we have Kite Skin. With this trait, every vertical drop, even the rather large ones within a compound, become a potential traversal route. It helps you move around very quickly with these new routes opened up, and people don't really expect them either. When you can get from the top of fort to the ground in seconds, without even taking a bar of damage, you can really get the drop on people. Now, not directly, by the way. If you jump off the top of fort, I believe you'll still die with this perk, but you can just hit bits of terrain on the way down and you're all good. Now we're going to talk about the best of the best, the traits that buff the most important parts of your hunter or provide abilities you just can't get elsewhere. S tier starts with Lightfoot. That's right, I've been converted. In the same way that Kite Skin allows you to open up traversal routes and Beast Face helps you flank, Lightfoot lets you do all of that and more. Taking ladders, vaulting a window, even dropping down a floor during a stealth flank becomes suddenly viable. You can even use the bunny hop technique to get right up behind people and they won't hear a thing. Lightfoot is Hunt's premier stealth perk, for when stealth really matters. When you're in a compound with enemies nearby, Lightfoot is basically the only thing that can make you harder to detect while moving, and that is powerful. Then we have Serpent. I can't speak highly enough of Serpent. Firstly, it allows you to get annoying or dangerous clues. Those ones that are exposed or have a meathead sitting on them. This is especially helpful when solo. An added bonus is that enemy players will see clue defenders untouched, and then will be completely freaked out when they see the clue has been taken. You can also steal bounties from lairs when people are trying to camp, and instantly scan to determine how many players are inside and how many other teams are lurking the area as well. The enemy can always just pick up both bounties, but then at least they're marked with the lightning. Now I've won so many complex multi-team fights because of an early Serpent pickup. It lets you do things that would be impossible without it. I think at this point, Serpent is probably my single favourite trait in the game. It's extremely underrated, and I take it early on every single hunter that I'm leveling up. So this time, I've also put Pitcher in S tier. Throwables in Hunt are very, very strong at the moment. I find that I'm closing out most fights with a frag grenade, or opening up with a frag grenade, or just using frag grenades all the time. And Pitcher lets you place those grenades so much better. You can chase escaping enemies better, you can get throws up into high places or windows, it provides you with much more reach. Now, even though it might only look like a small increase in the number of meters that you can throw, if you calculated the coverage area of your throwables, taking into account the full diameter of what you can now reach, it is a significant improvement to something that's already a really powerful way to play the game. Finally, Doctor of course retains its S tier position. Double your heals from first aid kits. It speaks for itself really, it gets you into the fight faster too. So that is it for broad spectrum traits. But then we have a good range of traits restricted to specific weapons or loadouts. Let's count from the bottom up, starting with D tier again. Now these are kind of super D tier because they only work with some seriously limited setups anyway. So, steady aim. I know it's controversial, but at least on PC, this is a rubbish trait. I'd go as far to say that it's useless. Weapon sway is more or less irrelevant on PC for rifle class weapons. Moreover, this trait only kicks in after aiming down sights for extended periods of time. In Hunt, this is a bad idea. This alone means that for me, I will never ever see this proc, because staying hardscoped for extended periods of time is a great way to die. Now on console it might be useful because the sway works slightly differently, but still you're probably better off dragging your crosshair onto targets. This trait simply does not synergize with the best ways to shoot and play the game. If you are aiming up targets in a way that benefits from steady aim, you are not aiming up targets using the most effective methods available to you. I'm also going to place Bolt Seer here. It's another rubbish perk that wastes a trait slot. You should be able to find your bolts and knives without using this. If you can't, it will help, but very rarely. I have seen some theory crafting around sticking a bolt into someone and using this to track where they are, but I have never seen that work in practice due to the limited range and the fact that if someone's moving within that range, you can hear them anyway. We then have Iron Devastator, perhaps the only trait that has absolutely no advantage in the current game build at all. This is because, although it does increase the fire rate of the Spectre and variants while aiming down sights, this fire rate is still slower than hip firing, and there is zero benefit to aiming down sights with shotguns, so you would never do this. All you do when you aim down sights is reduce your fire rate, even with this trait. However, if customizable ammo gives us slug rounds for the Spectre shotgun, this would marginally improve the fire rate of those slug rounds when aiming down sights for extra precision. So I can see this being quite useful in the future. Now to C tier. Steady Hand is the only perk I put in this category, for all the same reasons why Steady Aim was in D tier, except that Steady Hand works on the Winfield and the Springfield Deadeye variants. Now because these are stockless, they have quite high sway. So if you were the kind of person to hardscope with them, which isn't a great idea anyway, this trait would actually have some limited use. So let's go right on to B tier. Fanning. What? Yep, that's right. And I'll explain. This used to be a great option for CQC fighting. But these days, there are many more reliable ways to kill things at close range. Shotguns, officers, Bornheim, Dolch, even the melee options tend to outclass fanning when many of the guns that can fan are used. It's let me down too many times. Now fanning is still useful, it still has a place. There will be times when you fall back around a corner and barrage someone with a fanning pistol, and you'll get lucky, wipe a team, get a couple of great kills, but reliability is a massive factor for me when putting a loadout together. Anything that has that high degree of randomness gives a poor impression. Fanning has fallen off the list of traits that I will take even for a Mosin uppercut build, although I'd probably still use it a lot when at a lower level, when using a conversion pistol, with a Sparks maybe, or to be honest at this point, once you get the Nagant Officer, it's just a better close range option than fanning. Now the same can be said for levering, which is also in this tier. Now I've decided that I'd prefer to fire 2 shots while aiming down sights with a Winfield and try and hit both of them in the chest, then rely on levering to land 2 out of 3 shots that could be fired in the same time span, especially considering that those shots will likely clip a limb for less damage. Now if you're a new player, or your aim is not the best, then these traits can still be very good for you. What you will tend to find, however, and this is an opinion or pattern that's shared by many people with thousands of hours in Hunt, is that as you improve, your aim improves. And that means you're going to find it easier to place your shots where you want them than rely on RNG to get hits. This is why I've moved away from fanning and levering, it's just too random. Now this is also why certain players with many hours in the game really don't like all the spam, but that's a different discussion. Now you could say the same thing about shotguns, but if you use shotguns within a specified range, then they are actually really reliable, provided you aim for center mass. Again, this is also a discussion for another time. Let's finish off B tier by mentioning Ambidextrous. This trait improves the reload for dual pistols, which usually have a lot of ammo already. It's nice, but also kind of mediocre, that's why it's here. For A tier, we have 5 traits that I will look at simultaneously because they all do exactly the same thing for their respective weapon classes. Iron Repeater, Iron Sharpshooter, Deadeye, Marksman, and Sniper Scopesmith are all essentially the same. They keep you aiming down sights, but they also improve the fire rate of the relevant weapon category when aiming down sights by a not insignificant margin. So this flat out buffs your time to kill on rifles. So yeah, it's pretty good. I always take these if I'm using a relevant weapon. If you've never used a Carabiner Deadeye with Deadeye Scopesmith, give it a go, that thing fires pretty damn quickly. Now also in A tier, I've put Bullet Grubber. Now if you're running a Mosin and an uppercut, this trait isn't that good because you'll still get lots of ammo, but it's not why it's here. If you are running a Lebel without an uppercut, then you're going to get only 1 or 2 bullets from each ammo box. You will also not be able to top up the rifle, which has an extremely slow reload, without wasting ammo. So you are forced to choose between not having much ammo or entering fights with a half-empty magazine. Bullet Grubber means you don't have to compromise, and while it's probably more like B tier for some weapons like the Spectre or Bornheim, it really is a crucial trait when using the Lebel, Dolch, Aftermath, and maybe even the Mosin. And finally, we come to our last category, S tier for loadout specific traits. Well, we have Quatermaster. It's here by definition, it can't be anywhere else because some loadouts need Quatermaster. They literally cannot exist without it. And then we have Bolt Thrower. In almost every case, this is a useless perk, but if you're using a crossbow, it is damn near essential. It just about halves the reload time and therefore almost doubles the fire rate of crossbows. Without this trait, crossbows are pretty average, but with it, you can wipe teams and be an absolute menace within that 30-meter range bracket. I'm at the point where I pretty much will not run crossbows unless I have this trait. It's like a tax to make crossbows good. So, wow, that is a lot of speaking from me, and this has been a lengthy video. I suppose now it's your turn. Feed that algorithm. Thank you for watching. Thanks especially to our Patreon supporters. This is Ascendance from 4FS Gaming, and I'll see you in the comments below.